So he gets back on his iPhone and he's Googling for high-priced hookers and expensive watches. Then he updates his Facebook photo with a big stack of cash like this.
Oh my gosh! So you just can't make this stuff up.
So we used that. The lawyer that did it, Carmen's a great lawyer, and so they used that. He practiced a lot, and so when he did his presentation, that picture of the bad guy with the stack of cash is behind him during his opening.
Welcome to Cases Gone Wild podcast. This is our first episode brought to you by Marko Law. I'm your host, John Marko. I've been an attorney for about 2 decades now, and through my career, I've seen some of the craziest, wildest cases that you wouldn't believe. And that's what we're going to talk about here on my show. If you like the show, be sure and subscribe. Leave us a review, please, so we can get out there and reach more people. And on today's episode, we have a very special guest for our inaugural episode. Donn Fresard is here with us today. Donn, I've known for a long time, and he is a 1984 graduate of DCL, which was in Detroit. He went into private practice, and after private practice, he joined the prosecutor's office in Wayne County and became the chief of staff for Kim Worthy, where he practiced for many, many years and has a lot of interesting experiences. He was also the president of the Detroit Bar Association. He's a good lawyer, a good man, a good friend. Donn Fresard.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today, Jen. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Donn. Thanks for being here, buddy.
Not a problem at all. Just it's another great day in Detroit.
Tell us a little bit about your experience. I know that I introduced you, but just give us a little more info.
Well, I was in private practice for about 17 years, and then Kim Worthy offered me the opportunity to be the chief of staff downtown. And at first, I had my own firm, I had my own building, I had everything that I wanted. But I thought it would be interesting to explore that, and I tried it for a month, and then I just stayed with it. So the thing about, as you know, being a lawyer, it's never boring because every day is like a TV show, and being a prosecutor, every day is like Law and Order, because that's just how it is every single day.
So tell me about something. I bet you saw some crazy stuff, man, at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office over the years. Like, what's one of the craziest cases that you want to tell us about?
Probably one of the craziest cases would be the Kwame Kilpatrick perjury case. So Kwame Kilpatrick is the mayor of the city of Detroit, and he fired a high-ranking police officer for no good reason. And the officer sued for wrongful discharge, and that officer's lawyer had subpoenaed text message transcripts from, I think it might have been called Nextel. It used to be
like those little beep phones, like beep, beep, you know?
It was before, there used to be a time when cell phones weren't, the texting just wasn't that user-friendly, so you had a device just to text with. So the city bought these, as I understand it. The salesman was a friend of Kwame's. And so they bought these not realizing that this is the one company that keeps the text messages forever. That's their pitch.
So there's a lawsuit involving the mayor of Detroit. And I remember Kwame when I was younger because we were going through a tough time. There was a lot of corruption in the city. And so a subpoena was sent out and somebody got all of his text messages as part of this case?
The actual text messages, yes. So you can still get, in law enforcement, we do it all the time, you can still get the text messages, but you have to get them like within 30 days. Because they just nobody wants
purged, right? Yeah.
Well, because nobody wants to have all the electronic storage. But with this company, they got all the text messages, and he had specifically denied having an affair with Christine Beatty in the trial.
Under oath.
Correct.
So that's perjury.
Right. But perjury under Michigan law is a little bit difficult because you have to prove the actual truth of the perjury. So, for example, under federal law, if you testified on Monday at a deposition that the room was blue and you testified on Tuesday that the room was red, that's enough to support a perjury conviction. Under Michigan law, you'd have to bring in separate independent evidence to prove that the room was in fact blue or the room was in fact red. You have to show the independent evidence.
So what happened when they get all these text messages from Kwame, part of this lawsuit that has nothing to do with any criminal case, right? It's like a civil case for wrongful termination.
Correct.
And what happens?
So then what happens is the pressure starts to mount on the prosecutor to authorize charges. and it becomes extremely awkward. One of the reasons that you very seldom see local prosecution of elected officials is because a lot of times the people are political allies. Kim Worthy's above reproach. She was never beholden to anybody, and she never was that much of an ally with Kwame Kilpatrick. And it was strange because we were driving to Kamak.
Courthouse, big courthouse downtown.
Right, we had to go there for something because we were in another building, and the phone rang, and it was Kwame Kilpatrick. It was an election year for Kim. And
calling
Kim Worthy, which she didn't even know how he got her phone number. And he said, "I just want to let you know that I'm not going to be endorsing any other candidates but you." And so we just looked at each other and said, "What's this have to do with anything?" And then the next day, the Free Press, because it used to be when you got the paper, when we would get the Free Press in the morning Free Press, it was the whole scandal broke. So
that's wild. I mean, so the mayor of Detroit, and then you're the Wayne County Prosecutor's office, and bringing charges against the sitting mayor. I mean, this was
pretty heavy. So the first thing that we had to do is we had to create a war room, a safe space that was, because you don't know who the enemies are, and you don't know
moles. There could probably be moles and leaks and everything.
Exactly. So that's the first thing. So the county had a really good architect at the time, and I would do, as the chief of staff, my job was to do the nuts and bolts kind of things. So we had the walls. A lot of times the walls don't go all the way to the underlying ceiling. There's partitions. So
you had to build a physical room just for this case?
Yes, we had to build a physical room that you couldn't climb over the walls to get into.
Oh my gosh!
Heavy duty doors, because this was a while ago, and so all these text messages were all printed out. So there was banker boxes and banker boxes and banker boxes full of text messages to go over, and there was just all kinds of stuff in there and things that I don't even care to repeat.
Oh my God, I bet. I don't want anybody getting all my text messages either. Jeez.
No.
Geez.
So then what happened is the perjury case was okay, not perfect.
So they did bring charges against the mayor?
Correct. And then our investigators went to serve a subpoena on, I believe it might have been his mother. His mother was a congresswoman, and these were very high-ranking people.
Very well connected.
Right. So there was some kind of party at one of the family members' homes, and we sent 2 investigators out, and it upset Mr. Kilpatrick, and he pushed the investigator. So then the Attorney General at that time, Mike Cox, brought a charge of assaulting a peace officer in the course of their duties. So at that moment, the governor, Governor Granholm at the time, a political ally, if you're the Democratic governor, you would be typically politically allied with the mayors of the large Democratic cities. And they were. So she was placed in the uncomfortable position of having to initiate the removal proceedings. So while this is taking place, they were in, I think, 1 Cadillac Place, that state of Michigan building where the Court of Appeals is, a New Center area.
Yeah, I remember. I used to work there, my first job.
And the hearings were already going on. So they were conducting hearings on the same behavior and the same allegations for the purpose of removing him from office. So once the Attorney General leveled the second charges, then Mr. Kilpatrick resigned from office.
God, that's crazy. I mean, that kind of talks, there's so many levels there. There's, first of all, public corruption, right? Which, I mean, I remember that time. It was rampant. I mean, it was everywhere. In the police force, it was pretty widespread. But there's, so much going on there with when you bring a criminal case against a sitting mayor who's very well connected. I mean, that must have been kind of exciting, but also a little bit concerning,
All of the above. So at the same time, you have to remember that there was the actual corruption going on with Bobby Ferguson and taking the bribes. And
who's Bobby Ferguson? I don't remember Bobby Ferguson.
So Bobby Ferguson was a gentleman that Mr. Kilpatrick met, and they kind of hit it off. And there was, the saying was, if Bobby doesn't get a part of this deal's not going to go forward. So like the Cobalholics,
kickbacks and bribes and stuff. How does this go? Do you think it's gotten better? Or do you think that there still is this public corruption that goes on?
There's always something going on. Where I work in Macomb County now, for example, there was just the Commissioner of Public Works was just sentenced to, he only got house arrest, and he can't use the computer, so it's not that bad of a sentence. But they were taking, apparently in the Public Works contracts, they were doing some things illegally. I don't know what the specifics are. There was, I believe in Macomb Township, I think it was one of the trustees, or I forget exactly who it was, some office holder out there. Somebody was about to start a parking lot, a contractor. And it was actually a friend, his wife's friend of my sister's. And this guy came up and said, you can't start until you give me this much money. And so he had to pay the guy a bribe. So he got charged with paying the guy a bribe. And then they eventually dropped his charge, but that guy got convicted, and that guy went to prison.
It's always about the money, man.
It's always about the money. Well, one of the mistakes, I think, is that if public salaries ought to be at least at market or even higher so that people aren't tempted to take a bribe. I've never seen any good reason to take any kind of bribes or anything, and I've been in public service for 20 years. But a lot of people just think that's part of the program, and that's why they're eager to get into public service, because they can take bribes.
Yeah, and I feel like the salaries for public servants have not
no, they're not
stayed at the same rate as inflation and as everything else. I mean, if you're a lawyer or a judge working in public service, you are not doing it for the money. That's for sure.
Well, the judges are up to, I think they're up to 160, so that's not too bad. The governor's probably at 180. The prosecutor's salary, I think Kim Worthy probably makes 165, 175. But who's woefully underpaid is the Attorney General, Dana Nessel. She makes 112,000, and the Secretary of State only makes 112,000. So it's really ironic, because in order to keep the talent in the Attorney General's office, there's something like, I want to say over half the lawyers make more than she does.
That's crazy. And I read an article, the Michigan Supreme Court justices are making less than the Court of Appeals judges. Mm-hmm. Some of the stuff just doesn't make sense. Don, I'd like to talk about corruption. And I just did a case this week that we got a verdict of $8.32 million against the city of Detroit. And talk about crazy cases. I mean, in this case, Don, a wheel came off a City of Detroit DDOT, Detroit Department of Transportation van, came literally off because they forgot to put the lug nuts on. Mm-hmm. And we're in a rush. It was the day before the 4th of July.
Okay.
They probably wanted
Makes
to go
sense.
drink some beers at their backyard barbecue. I don't blame them, but they forgot to put these lug nuts on. And the wheel blows off and starts rolling down the street, and it smashes into my client who's walking across the street going to CVS.
What happened to him?
Horrible injuries. He had brain damage, traumatic brain injury. He had fractured his skull. He had a blasted clavicle. He was deaf in his left ear. I mean, the guy's messed up. But that's a crazy case in of its own. But what was the most troubling to me is, and we're talking about the city of Detroit, right? So this, again, this is a public institution, right? It's a public entity. And they destroyed all the maintenance records for this van the same day that my guy's in the hospital. So the wheel blasts them, and somebody literally goes and says, we better destroy all these records so they can't figure out who worked on the van. And, I mean, at what level?
What about the tire?
They destroyed the tire. They destroyed the hubcaps. I mean, this was a concerted this was literally a conspiracy. I mean, and then we get to trial and we find out that there was hard maintenance records inside filing cabinets at the DDOT garage. Somebody with access and a key went inside the locked office, went into the hard file, and pulled all the physical maintenance records and destroyed those. So, this is literally, you would think in public government, how can this happen? How can somebody get hurt? A citizen. And you have officials working together to cover it up, and basically it's a crime, right? Isn't destroying evidence a crime? I mean, from a criminal standpoint, I don't know the criminal laws on this, Don, but
probably obstruction of justice. What level? So did you ever come up with a suspect that you thought was the one that did it?
8 years. I mean, we asked them who did it, and at trial they said, look, it wasn't me, but it shouldn't have happened. Everyone said it wasn't me,
but it shouldn't have happened.
They said it shouldn't have happened. Everything went to the City of Detroit Law Department and then disappeared, apparently. But I mean,
they sent it to the law department and then it disappeared? Nobody knows?
Nobody knows. We haven't gotten a clear story. Oh, and then there was a journal. There was a mechanics journal, and they ripped all the pages out of the journal.
Really?
That shows, I mean, it's crazy. And how can this happen? And what can we do about it?
Well, nowadays, there's more and more of the stuff's electronic. And so we have some cases in Macomb County that involve electronic evidence. And even if you want to wipe most hard drives, they can go back and they can dig that information out of there. Not always, though.
Yeah.
So we have one case right now that involves an iPhone, and that was reset to the factory defaults. And so apparently with an iPhone, you can't do that. That's what we're told anyways. So I think that with the electronic documents, it's easier to keep track. And there probably should be some sort of, it would probably stand to reason, given that case, that there be some sort of an audit trail and that there be some third party, another city agency that would make sure that the records are kept for litigation.
Yeah.
But things happen, it's like when you see a lot of times in malpractice cases, there's just a lot of people that come through hospitals. And so you have people are working, you're supposed to do this and that and the other thing, and someone doesn't do one part of their job, and then someone else doesn't do another part of their job, and someone else doesn't quite do another part of their job. And the compound effects of these are a malpractice case. And with the documents, there's obviously somebody who thought that their job would be in jeopardy if those documents were around. Because what else would be the motivation? It would be hard to figure what level and what motivation there would be for somebody to think that would, anybody high enough that would have the thought process to think that if we destroy these documents, it will help the city with their liability on this case. Anybody with that high of a level probably wouldn't do that.
But it backfires. I mean, as a lawyer, like in my case, like this case, for example, that's the bet. My first thing to the jury was, look, a guilty party destroys the evidence. Why else? If they didn't do anything wrong, just give us the evidence.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty good evidence of guilt. It's like flight. What did the judge think about the whole thing?
Yeah, well, she wasn't happy. Neither was the jury, right?
Okay.
So I mean, $8.32 million.
They weren't happy about it at all.
I think the proof's in the pudding. But that's an interesting question. What do you do as a lawyer when the other side destroys evidence? I mean, obviously we want to tell the jury about it. I think it helps the case, right? Mm-hmm. Like you are just general common sense, but. In this case, we asked the judge to do some things, and you can do some things under the law. So the judge, first of all, instructed the jury that the destroyed evidence would have been bad for the city of Detroit. So
Okay.
She said they destroyed it. There hasn't been a reasonable excuse for destroying it. I am instructing you that this evidence would have been bad for their case. In other words, it would have showed that they did something wrong with the van that caused it to hurt my client. That's helpful.
So did she order that?
She ordered that, yep. So you get to read that to the jury, and then I can talk about it in my closing and say the judge has found that they violated the law.
So did you use the actual order when you talked to the jury?
Read from it? It's a jury instruction. It's
okay.
It's 6.01. It's a standard Michigan jury instruction.
All right.
The judge also, you can do other things. As a plaintiff's attorney, if my client destroys evidence, the case can get kicked out of court, right? You just lose automatically sometimes. So we asked for that. The judge didn't go that far. It's hard to get, even with this blatant destruction, to get the automatic win.
Okay.
But she did order that the city produce all the stuff they destroyed that we could recreate. So like the wheel, it's a big wheel. I mean, huge wheel. They had to go purchase an exemplar wheel, an exemplar tire, an exemplar nuts and bolts that I got to show the jury, and they had to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So that was helpful. I've had a case, I had a case against Walmart. They destroyed the garage door that came down on some dude's head, and the judge they destroyed the garage door in the middle of trial. And I'm like,
Really?
I'm like, I need this for trial. And the judge ordered them to go get a flatbed truck, go find an identical garage door down in like Alabama, put it on the truck, and drive it to the courthouse for the first day of trial. We settled like an hour later. But you can get creative on this stuff, and ask for different things. I mean, the judge can fashion remedies to try to
level the playing
field, because there's a great quote, I think, from the Sixth Circuit that's like, no other act threatens the justice system more than spoliation of evidence, destroying evidence, save perjury. So they said perjury is the worst, but other than that, I mean, you destroy evidence, we can't do this, right? How do we present fair cases and get to the truth?
Got to level out. That's particularly ironic with that being DDOT, because DDOT, the complaint often is that they have like almost twice the mechanics of every other major city for that number of buses.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of people, but like you said, probably there's a lot of long weekends going on.
Yeah, and it was weird. The head of DDOT got up there and said,
Oh, what did he say?
He said, Mr. Marko, These records should have never been destroyed. I don't know who did it. It's very concerning. But he said someone at the highest level was involved in destroying these records. Who that is, we may never know.
Really?
If you're listening out there, maybe you destroyed the records. I don't know.
Somebody they're probably
did.
watching this podcast.
Somebody did.
They're rubbing their hands together.
Yeah, they never said. That's the way in closing. Who destroyed the record? Just tell us who did it. We'll never know.
Whose office was the file cabinet in?
It was inside the Department of Transportation's garage in the office.
Okay.
So we just discovered, there were some paper records too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you think about that, though. Somebody had to go get a key who had access, go into a filing cabinet while there's a guy dying in a hospital and say, let's go destroy and burn all the records related to this van. You know, they would have been better off just saying, we screwed up. We didn't put the lug nuts on. Here's the records. We're sorry. What can we do? But instead, no one wanted to admit anything wrong. It was just lie, deny, deceive, deflect, destroy.
So why didn't they settle that case?
You got to talk to the people at the city. Somebody screwed up. I told them, I said, how are you going to, this is a simple case. A dude got hit by a tire. But do you see people do stupid things, when not settling cases that they should?
Oh, especially nowadays with the level of electronic evidence has exploded so much, even just in the last 36 months. We recently obtained a conviction. There's two guys meet in prison. And they get out, and the one guy lives at his parents' house. He's in his 40s, just a bum. And the other guy's a little more ambitious, so he's putting together a fentanyl smuggling operation to and from Tennessee. And they're close, they're friends. The smuggler's 6-year-old son calls the bad guy Uncle Nick. So Uncle Nick wants money. He's too lazy to do anything for it, and he knows that the smuggler has $100,000 in cash. So the smuggler comes over one day in a rented Kia, and the first thing is that Nick's parents' video camera videos Nick getting into the Kia, and then there's a bright flash in there, and the Kia slowly rolls down the driveway. That's when he shot the guy in the side of the head. So then
steal his money.
Mm-hmm. So Nick puts the guy in the back seat and drives to
his dead body in the back seat. Oh my God!
Then drives to that guy's house, and unbeknownst to Nick, this rented Kia has a GPS tracking system that pings every couple minutes or every couple miles, I forget which. So when he goes to the guy's house, a neighbor's Ring doorbell picks up his car and completely verifies and aligns with the pinging system in the Kia.
Yeah.
So he goes in the house, pistol whips and beats the guy's girlfriend and the 6-year-old who calls him Uncle Nick and kills them both and finds about half the money. So then he leaves the house.
Kills the kid?
Kills the kid. Yeah, the kid. They calls him Uncle Nick.
I don't know how you guys do this criminal stuff. It's horrible.
So then he pulls out of there and goes on, I believe, 8 Mile, and he stops at a gas station, and then his whereabouts are confirmed by the gas station's got great video. So it shows him walking in, and he buys a gas can, and then he gets it filled with gas, and he drives off again. This is during the pandemic. So he kind of drives around for a while just aimlessly. He possibly looking for a place to burn the car, was what he's going to do. So he ends up going downtown then, and this is all tracked. We had it all on big screens, and you could see everything that he had done. So he went downtown. There's a Hyde Park area just outside the downtown proper.
Detroit?
Mm-hmm. So then he douses the body with gasoline, lights it on fire, then walked into Greektown because there's always taxi cabs there.
Yeah.
So then he shows up with the Dan Gilbert surveillance cameras downtown. It shows him walking right past the Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, and it shows him walking right into Greektown. Then it shows him getting into a cab, and then the cab's GPS'd, and their records show that it was delivered back to his parents' house. So that night, the fire department was called out to this car fire. They discover it's a homicide, and then when they turn the guy over, because he was face down, his face wasn't burnt, and so they have facial recognition. They took his picture, and that lined up with his driver's license. So they found his name, and they called the city of Warren police, and the Warren police went to the house for a wellness check. The door was ajar, and they found the 2 dead bodies and photographed that scene. So that guy went home that night. He turned his iPhone back on because he had bought a burner phone, and he used the burner phone one time when he was driving around, because burner phones don't ping like a regular phone. But if you make a call, you can ping that. And so that lined up again with his route. So he gets back on his iPhone, and he's Googling for high-priced hookers and expensive watches. Then he updates his Facebook photo with a big stack of cash like this.
Oh my gosh. So you just can't make this stuff up.
So we used that, the lawyer that did it, Carmen's a great lawyer. And so they used that, he practiced a lot. And so when he did his presentation, that picture of the bad guy with the stack of cash is behind him during his opening. It's just
Yeah,
great.
so that guy was back at Frank Murphy pretty soon, huh?
No, that was a Macomb County case.
Oh, Macomb County.
Because that for the homicides in Warren.
Oh, and then he went downtown Detroit.
Well,
Yeah.
he actually, so he murdered his friend in Oakland County, burned him in downtown Detroit, and then but he had murdered those two people in Macomb. And there's a statute that says that if you use a vehicle and you commit crimes in more than one jurisdiction, any jurisdiction can prosecute it. But the city of the Warren Police Department did a great job, a fantastic job, and then the lawyers did a great job, and then I thought the jury did a great job. They were only out a short amount of time, and then so Nick got life in prison where he belongs.
Yeah, well, thanks for keeping us safe, Don.
He's a bad guy. Can you? I mean, you can't even imagine that. Just
No.
For the sake of money, you'd kill the 6-year-old kid that calls you Uncle Nick.
I mean, some of the stuff that I haven't done a lot of criminal stuff, but my first job was doing appeals for the Michigan Supreme Court for Marilyn Kelly. And I just remember reading all these criminal appeals because you'd get, every criminal appeals to the Supreme Court, right? So we'd get thousands. And I'd read the stuff, and it's like, it's just so inhumane, and you just can't believe that this actually happened because it doesn't seem like real life.
Well, we just had one that just wrapped up where a gentleman's dating a woman in Roseville, and she says, I want to date other people. So he stabbed her, I think, 27 times, left her to die. And then he came back to steal the flat screen TV and burn the...
Oh, he had to get the TV. All right, I got to get the TV on the way out,
It's all on Ring video.
It's all about it's all about the money, huh?
So they got a search warrant. They searched his house, found the flat screen TV and some other stuff, some for money and checks and whatnot. So he got convicted, and it turned out that Detroit had an open investigation. He was a suspect in killing another girlfriend. That's just who this guy was. He's a really nice-looking guy, and he'd be on all the social media sites.
Well, I'm not sleeping well tonight, Don. This is, this scary truth of what's going on
just
out there.
Some horrible things. It's just something you just shake your head, and why did you have such poor judgment? And then some people will come back again and again, just doing stupid things. It's hard to like destroying evidence.
Yeah,
that's stupid.
Yeah. Well, they keep us in business, right?
Somebody said one time that if people just went around making good decisions, what would the lawyers do?
That's right. That's right.
we gotta help them out.
Maybe one day we'll have a world where we don't need any of the lawyers anymore. I think a lot of people would be happy.
No.
Until then,
what would we do then?
Yeah,
we'd have to do something boring. What was the biggest surprise in the trial that you just did?
The biggest surprise in the trial I just did was that after 8 years, they couldn't come up with any explanation for how they could destroy every single piece of evidence related to this incident. I was just shocked on, you guys had 8 years to come up with some lame excuse. They didn't come up with anything. I mean, they got caught with their hand in the cookie jar, and they don't take responsibility. Like when you do something wrong, it usually goes way better if you just accept responsibility.
Well, the cover-up's often worse than the crime.
Cover-up's worse than the crime.
When I did criminal defense, there was this one fellow that he broke into a party store and he stole some beer and some dirty magazines. This was before internet porn. And the cops pulled up, so he threw the beer on the roof, but he still had the magazines in his hand. So it was in the paper because he was. Everyone thought it was funny that he broke into this place to get these dirty magazines. Nobody knew about the beer on the roof. So when he came to see me, I said, I want you to go get about $1,000 in cash, go to the party store, and say, I'm that drunk idiot that broke your door in, and I want to pay for it. And so he did that. And when we were in court 2 weeks later, the party store owner was there and said, I don't care what happens to this guy. But so it completely softened the target.
Yeah.
Because he accepted responsibility. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And you see it with some defendants. Have you ever had a case where the defendant will admit liability and just go to damages?
Yeah, I hate it normally because
you're not going to get the jury mad on that one.
That's right. That's right. So it makes it better for my client usually when they cheat and lie and deceive and cover up. The cover ups.
The smart lawyers will tell you got to get the jury mad if you want to get the big verdict.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
So in your case that you just had, if the lawyer from the city of Detroit would have stood up and said, "This is our fault. a wheel came off one of our vehicles. The city has 2,000 employees, and they don't always do exactly what they're supposed to do, and we feel terrible about it, and we want to do what's right. And so we're going to ask you to give this poor man some money.
Yeah, I think they would have, and they would not have given $8.3 million.
No, they could have talked that. They could have talked that way down because they could have. How old is the gentleman?
He's in his 60s now.
Yeah, so
he was like 57 at the time.
So there's a statutory life expectancy is probably age 80 maybe.
Yeah, we had like I think 17 years on the verdict form.
Yeah,
they gave $200,000 a year in the future for 16 or 17 years.
For salary, for wages, or just
just pain and suffering because it was a auto case. So and then $5 million in past damages.
Okay,
but look, they're gonna litigate. You know how we can't control how they do things, and this is why we have juries, and this is why we have cases, and this is why we have cases gone wild, man. Thanks a lot, Don. Thanks for coming on.
John, always a pleasure to see you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Keep us safe out there, man.
Do everything that we can.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to Cases Gone Wild today. On behalf of Marko Law Firm, if you or someone you know needs help or legal representation, please go to my website, markolaw.com, or give us a call, 313-777-7-LAW. Until next time.